Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
There we go. That's more. I mean, it's not that cold outside. We can do better than that, right? Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out this evening. I have been excited about this panel for weeks, months now. In fact, we have a fantastic lineup, and it is my pleasure to bring this event to you. My name is Samuel Roberts. I'm the director of the Columbia. Director of the Columbia University Institute for Research in African American Studies. Also known as IRAAS. IRAAS, by the way, was founded in 1993 by the late Dr. Manning Marable, whom you probably know from his wide breadth of scholarship, most recently published posthumously his biography of Malcolm X. He came to Columbia in 1993 with the mission, established in IRAAS, the mission which we pursue to this day, to quote unquote envision, engage, and transform. That is from, in fact, our mission statement. We envision, engage, and transform the world around us. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this month's event in IRAAS's public event series, which we've simply called Conversations. This title indicates its main purpose to bring visionary thought and practice leaders into an engagement with you, our IRAAS family, and to have a discussion about how we might move forward and transform the world around us. You may find information, by the way, about future IRAAS events at www.iraas.com. That's IRAAS.com. Please join us for future events. We have another one next month. We do things pretty regularly, in fact, until May or so. So please feel free to join us for future events. This month, and in partnership with Of Note magazine, the award-winning arts and activism publication, whose founder and editorial director is none other than Grace Ali, the Institute is proud to host a conversation with Ms. Ali and three dynamic artists who use their creative voice to examine the complex experiences, both personal and political, faced by the over 2 million men, women, and youth currently imprisoned in the United States of America. I encourage each of you to read Of Note magazine at www.ofnotemagazine.org. That's OFNOTE magazine.org, which soon will publish its special imprisonment issue. And if you've seen past issues of Note magazine, then you know what to expect. Some of the highest quality journalism and artistic work that you can find online or in print, for that matter. I will let Grace talk a bit more about Of Note later on, but I just wanted to say that this is truly worth your reading, and check out the new imprisonment issue later this month. Via theater, photography, and video, these artists, who include Samara Gaev, Russell Frederick, and Lori Waselchuk. These three illuminate the ways in which our society treats those within our prison system with compelling work that engages and troubles our notion of justice. I think at this point in history, with current events almost threatening to overtake us, they're occurring with such rapidity, I think we really need to step back and think about what is, in fact, justice. Clearly, there's a little bit of a soapbox here, but I'll use it. Clearly, our ideas of criminal justice have been failing us, and not just recently, but for quite some time. By the way, for those of you who keep dual presences in the corporeal universe, and as I think they call it, the Twitterverse, that's what the kids are calling it these days, please be sure to check our handle at IRAAS-AAADSColumbiaU, and Of Note magazine tweets from Of Note magazine, and of course with the little @ signed before that. I just joined Twitter, so you can say I'm clearly inept at how this whole thing works, but I hear that's how it works, yeah. We will have, in this order of presentation, I will invite Grace to speak a bit about the special issue and how she compiled it, and about the work that went into it. We then will have Lori Waselchuk, who will speak about her work and contributions to the issue. In between that will be a brief excerpt from a production by the Truthworkers Theater Company and Samara Gaev. And finally, we will have Russell Frederick also sharing his photographic work as well. Then we will all take the stage and engage in a bit of conversation, at which point, in the true spirit of the title of our lecture series, Conversations, we will open the floor up for all of your questions and to have a kind of group discussion, which I am sure will be entirely stimulating. So first, I would like to introduce Grace Ali. Grace is I'm sorry, I do have a few words about that, but thank you for that enthusiasm. Just hold on a second, please. Grace is the founder and artistic director, I just skipped my paragraph there, sorry. Grace is the founder and editorial director of Note magazine, the award-winning online magazine focused on global artists using the arts as catalysts for activism and social change. In 2014, Of Note received the Images and Voices of Hope, also known as the IVOH Award, Media Award, for outstanding media project that shows a commitment to constructive change. Grace is also a faculty member in the Department of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences at the City College of New York, CUNY, of course, CUNY, and a current Andy Warhol Foundation Fellow for the Visual Arts Curatorial. I completely botched, I'm sorry. She is currently an Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts Curatorial Fellow. And I believe also, if we could just wave their hands, some of Grace's students are here as well, so I'd like to welcome them. Thank you so much for coming. Without further ado, Grace would like to say some remarks, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for your time and for coming out on a Thursday night to talk about an issue that I think we often don't want to talk about, and that's precisely why we're doing this conversation and this issue at Of Note this fall. I just first want to say a big thank you to Samuel Roberts. I couldn't have asked for a better partner and intellectual support system for this project. And you should all very much read Mr. Roberts' bio, because he's also a thought leader when it comes to thinking about issues around mass incarceration and imprisonment. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about who and what Of Note is. And we're very smart. We're completely digital. We don't waste papers and print. So you could always go online to ofnotemagazine.org. And what you're looking at is our current issue, the immigrant issue. And in this issue, we selected 10 artists, and we looked at how they were using their work, whether it was photography or film or poetry or theater arts, to really challenge the way we think about the immigrant in our 21st century time. And so I encourage you to go take a look at it. Our editorial curatorial model is that every issue we privately vet 10 artists, meaning I sometimes go out into the community and see how artists are performing, and we look at how they're really confronting a particular social justice theme. So the artists that you'll see here tonight actually weren't pitched to Of Note magazine. There were artists that were either nominated or that we saw on the ground doing the work, and that we were really incredibly impressed by. I don't know if Samara saw me in the audience when she did her production at Q, but I was watching and I was really moved by what she did with these young people, which she's graciously offered to share with us tonight. And so in thinking about curating this issue around the imprisoned, as many of you know, this is an issue that's so talked about. It's so documented. The scholarship, the reporting on it is actually very, very meaty. But when we were looking at how artists really confront this issue, what we were looking for is a particular thing around the idea of absence. Meaning, were these artists looking at this issue and thinking about the things that we're not talking about, the communities that we're not giving a voice to? And those things that are absent from this sort of beast of a conversation when we talk about imprisonment, we talk about incarceration, are things like, what is it like to be pregnant and in prison, right? How does an artist display that experience? What is it like to give birth shackled in prison? And although that experience of being shackled while you're giving birth is illegal, it still happens in many states. In Laurie's case, which you'll see in her beautiful moving project, Grace Before Dying, what does it mean to spend your last days in our prison systems? What does it mean to know you are dying in a prison and you need the kind of elderly medical care that the system just isn't financed to give you? In Russell's case, you'll see he does incredible work that actually has nothing to do with being in prison, physically in prison. But Russell Frederick lets us really think about the psychic state of being imprisoned. So for a lot of these men that he documents, what you see in these images so powerfully is that the physical state of imprisonment still carries with them even as they leave those institutions. And then Samara, whose work really thinks about which kind of voices are absent from the experts on this issue. And she gets these incredible 18 to 22-year-olds to learn about the experiences of being in prison and have these young people create and document those stories. And so you get to hear about that experience from a voice that we largely don't hear from. And so the issue comes out the end of this month. Again, you'll meet 10 additional artists, 10 total artists that really look and examine this issue and think about the idea of absence, what's absent from the conversations among it. But tonight, we're just extremely honored and really thankful that Lori, who's coming in from Philadelphia, we're so thankful for her for coming in from Philadelphia, and Samara from Brooklyn and Russell from Brooklyn are going to share with you their work. And we're really happy that you get to have access to what they do. So thank you all so much.
All right, let's get started. Before we do, I also want to thank our host this evening, Mist Harlem, and My Studios Incorporated, from where we are, I understand, broadcasting live on live stream. So if you are in your home or your office watching, welcome. And Twitter, again, is at IRAAS-AAADSColumbiaU and at Of Note Magazine as well. I'd also like to thank two forces of nature that we have working with us at IRAAS, Sean Mendoza and Sharon Harris, who put together so much of this program to make it what it is. Without further ado, I think we would like to introduce Lori Waselchuk, who is a Philadelphia-based visual storyteller. Her award-winning photographic documentary, Grace Before Dying, which she will share with us tonight, chronicles the prisoner-run hospice program at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola, Louisiana. I think many of you may know of that prison and its infamy. This work aims to challenge stereotypes about people that are imprisoned and offers a compassionate perspective into an environment designed to isolate and punish. You might check out more of this work and see some writing about it, and it's a wonderful website as well, gracebeforedying.org. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Lori Waselchuk.
Thank you very much. I am very honored to be here, and I am eager to be part of the conversation tonight. Okay. Are the lights going to come down at all, do you think? Especially these? Let's see. This is just open. Okay. So I'm just going to let the photographs cycle, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the project. I was introduced to the hospice program at Angola, which is Louisiana's maximum security prison, on an assignment, a magazine assignment. And I knew on the first day when I saw men who are incarcerated serving life sentences care for other men serving life sentences with tenderness, courage, compassion, selflessness. And this was the moment actually where I said, this is something extraordinary. who would have thought that men serving long-term sentences mostly for violent crimes would be capable of such passion and such compassion and love. So I guess I was drawn to this story. After the magazine came out, you don't get very much time to photograph a story for a magazine. After the magazine came out, I went back to the prison authorities and said, I'd really like to work on a long-term project about the hospice program. And after many promises that I had no right to make, and after lots of conversations and hoops to jump through, they let me back in on a long-term basis. At least long-term according to their definitions. My definition was much longer, and it took lots of askings to come back in. I was interested in telling the story of the caregivers. So the hospice caregivers at Angola are trained. They receive a 2-week intensive training. They're certified, which is, there's only 2 in the country where the incarcerated caregivers are certified hospice caregivers. They fund the program themselves through their quilts. They sell their quilts at the rodeo and in raffles. And they're organized with a staff nurse. So it's a program that they have built since 1998, slowly building trust in this community of incarceration. There's a blank slide. That's okay. There we go. And over the years, at first, when they first started this program, nobody trusted them. Not the incarcerated men, not the patients, not the medical staff, not the security staff. They had to gain the trust of everybody, and they did that not through talking, but through action and through their own commitment and love for the patients. And over the years, you can't fake hospice care. You are asked to do some of the most taxing work to try to care for somebody who has lost the capacity to move around on their own. It's very intimate and very hard work. So over the years, they've been able to gain the trust of the community. They've also developed a dignified burial ceremony for the people that pass, for the men who die in prison and they don't have enough resources to be buried outside of the prison. And so it's just been I guess it's been a labor of love for all of the volunteers that have built this program. I'm going to talk a little bit about the quilters. The quilters are also hospice caregivers, and I want you to know that hospice caregivers are volunteers. All the men at Angola have to have a 40-hour-a-week job, so they truly are volunteers. And there are some volunteers that volunteer 200 hours a month. And above and beyond that, the quilters are constantly making quilts to raffle off on the outside and to sell on the outside to pay for the things that make the patients feel more comfortable: slippers, robes, ice cream, strawberries, a coffee pot, a VCR. And I got money from a grant from the Open Society Foundations to build a traveling exhibit that was to be exhibited in prisons throughout the country. And part of that exhibit is we commissioned quilts from the quilt makers, and I brought one of them with me tonight. It's outside on exhibit. I felt it was important to have their hands represented as this exhibit moves around. I feel like they're still close to the things that the conversation that I wanted to create through Grace Before Dying. And I just can't tell you how important it is to have their hands represented next to my photographs. So I hope that you'll have a chance to have a look at their work outside. And I'll be happy to talk more about the project in our discussion.
All right. Next, we will have Samara Gaev, who is the founder and artistic director of Truthworker Theater Company, a social justice-based hip-hop theater company for high school and college-aged youth in New York City. Its recent original productions include Barcode, a performative analysis of the school-to-prison pipeline, and In Prism, Boxed In and Blacked Out in America, which examines the practice of solitary confinement in U.S. prisons. Her website the theater company's website is truthworker.com. Today she has with her some of the members of the Truthworker Theater Company who will perform elements of In Prison, Boxed In, and Blacked Out in America. Samara's presentation will be in 3 parts. I believe there will be she will read a poetic composition, at which point then she will speak a bit about her work, and then we will also have like I said, an excerpt from In Prison. So please welcome Samara Gaev and the Truthworker Theater Company.
We're going to see if the sound cue plays. It's not playing.
New inmate.
All the space. Y'all can hear us without the mic, right? Yes. Okay.
New inmate.
I am not poor. I'm not illiterate. I'm not a sugar daddy's girl. I'm not a whore. And yes, I know these things that women know now. A statistic now. A victim now. That's what they call me. Another mother woman, lover woman, daughter woman, sister woman, healer woman, magic woman, frightened woman. Broken by the victims of this system where we train boys to be criminals. Subliminal. It's in the cafeteria, the armed security. The way the ladies cross the street and clutch their purses, your teacher curses and daddy's locked up, mom's exhausted and mental health care is taboo. So if you're sick, boy, you're a criminal. Go get a gun, another name, and learn the streets where you belong, boy. Better be strong, boy. Better be strong, boy. Be a man. Another little boy locked up. Another woman scared to walk alone without a home. Another mother panicked. Father angry, and I need a break. Please, Mr. NYPD SVU, yeah, you. I need a break. He breaks up, breaks down, breaks in, breaks her, and she is me. And we're in 3. And I'm afraid it isn't over. I'm afraid it didn't start with me. Just find him, please, and lock him up and love him. Put him in a cell and make somebody love him, damn it. Make somebody love him, let him cry. He needs to find his salt, his water, cactus, thirsty in the desert, so he looks for light, for life, and tries to take it, steal it, to absorb that beauty, freedom, life force that we're made of, leaves us empty shells and shadows. Lock him in a cell and hold him when he cries, and catch him when he crumbles. I was raped. I was raped at gunpoint. I was raped at gunpoint in my elevator. I was raped at gunpoint in my elevator by a stranger. I was raped at gunpoint in my elevator by a stranger. He threatened to kill me. I was raped at gunpoint in my elevator by a stranger. He threatened to kill me, and he was so young. I was raped at gunpoint in my elevator by a stranger. He threatened to kill me, and he was so young and so scared and so young and so scared and angry. I tried not to scream. I tried not to cry. I tried not to die. Whatever I had to do to survive. With thunder in my ribs that makes my body jump the way it did when he attacked me. That moment that haunts me, makes my breath stop, shoulders lock, rewinds the clock, and I don't want to die. So I survived. His lips were tight. His eyes were cold. His face was mean. And I took care of him. And I took care of him. I took care of him.
Thank you. So, I came to this work many, many years ago as a teaching artist in New York City public schools and shelters, transfer schools, which you may not all know are for overaged, undercredited students in New York City, which often means that they've been gang affiliated, pregnant or parenting, or recently incarcerated, or truant for one reason or another. So in all those years as a teaching artist, about 13 or 14 years by now, I've been able to bear witness to how so many young people are shuffled through hallways that look and feel just like prisons, on a bell system, scanned by metal detectors, with school safety agents in full uniform, fed the same food as inmates in prisons owned by the same corporations. So firsthand, I've been experiencing this every day. And also over the years, looking into the eyes of so many underfunded, budget-cut administrators and educators who started off passionate and ended up being shuffled into teaching to the test. So I've witnessed firsthand the over-policing, the criminalization, the dehumanization of so many Black and brown, low-income bodies in our communities. And I've committed myself to building stages for young people to be the subjects, not the objects of their own stories. My own personal journey complicates this work. So after a decade of devoting myself to transforming the system by focusing on young people, on story, on education, on healing, on testimony, I pursued my master's degree. My scholarship looked at trauma, advocacy, and the witness, writing a thesis called The Sensate Witness, the Performing of Presence. And I argued for a reconfiguration of what it means to know, what it means to bear witness, which is interesting that that's our title. So witness etymologically means to see and therefore to know. To see and therefore to know. So it's also cool that we have photographers, so the lens is visual. And as a performer, my question is, what happens when we have knowledge that's neither visual nor cognitive? I'm also a doula, so I attend to women in childbirth. So I've gotten to also witness firsthand what happens when we have knowledge that's neither visual nor cognitive. How then do we testify when we have corporal knowledge? So this is my question, this is my theory, this is what I'm exploring. I finished my master's, I have a graduate degree, and 8 weeks later, I live that which I've theorized. When on a full moon night, trying to get home, and in my elevator, I'm met with a gun to my head by a young boy the age of my students, who looks at me over and over and says, "If you look at me, I'll kill you. If you look at me, I'll kill you. If you look at me, I'll kill you." He understood what it means to witness, to see, and therefore to know. And my body testified. And I was pressed up against this suffering, forced to embody, forced to hold that as my own corporal knowledge. So Why am I sharing this with you when we talk about bearing witness to incarceration, thinking about incarceration, when I'm here with my theater company? My own survival and my rape, that moment, that earthquake that sent everything falling off the bookshelves, is that moment, like I said, being pressed up against that suffering that caused me to really embody that trauma. And now, that young boy, who I couldn't help but feel, has been sentenced to multiple lifetimes in our prison system. He will die there. 174.5 years behind bars, and I'm not satisfied. And not because it's not enough, but because it's not gonna make things any better. Because I know that hurt people hurt people. So why are we gonna throw him into a system when he's already hurt, been hurt, hurting so he can get hurt more, be hurt, and will continue this cycle? How do we interrupt the cycle of violence is my question. Because open people. And I also know that to be true. So I started Truthworker Theater Company, a place for healing, a place for opening, a place for change makers. And our work looks at the many faces of incarceration, interrupting cycles of violence with melodies of hope and narratives of the triumphs and tragedies that so often go untold, trying to flip the paradigm of who gets to speak, what are the dominant narratives in our media, who tells their stories, and creating solution-driven citizens of the world so we can flip this universe over. Looking at the social problems that we so desperately try to disappear. Angela Davis says that prison has become a way of disappearing people in the false hope of disappearing the underlying social problems that they represent. And Martin Luther King has taught us that true compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar, but recognizing that an edifice that creates beggars needs restructuring. So trying to restructure this edifice, this system. With Truthworker, we started off last summer thinking about the school to prison pipeline, that which is most directly affecting my young people every day. As New York City public school students or former students, ranging from 15 to 21. And from that, we trace connections from Willie Lynch to Stop and Frisk, Trayvon Martin, working with key lawyers in the trials, 2013 summer, and weaving a thread between the systems that are designed to criminalize, dehumanize. And when we finish that, we realize we can't change the channel and talk now about teen pregnancy or climate change. We need to keep going and peel the layers of the onion back. There are more questions that we have, like what about the correlations between mental health and incarceration? How many juveniles in this country are put into isolation? Have we thought about capital punishment? What goes without saying, what they don't tell us, what we don't know? So we have questions. We started exploring those questions, and we were offered the unique opportunity to work with Jarvis J. Masters, an innocent man on death row. He's been institutionalized since he was a small boy from the age of 4 or 5, shuffled through foster care homes, a ward of the state by 11, and incarcerated at 19 for a string of robberies. Within a year of being in prison, he was falsely accused of being involved in sharpening a piece of metal that was used by someone else and ordered by someone else to murder a guard on a different tier, 2 tiers away. Jarvis has spent 22 years in solitary confinement, and he's been incarcerated as long as I've been alive. We've read both his books, Finding Freedom and That Bird Has My Wings, and we are inspired by his remarkable capacity for liberation within confinement. I guarantee you he's more free than any of us. It's amazing. He wrote those books with the inside of a pen by hand while in solitary. And they trace his memoir and his spiritual journey of Buddhism, where he's really invested himself in discovering compassion, discovering liberation. And what's taken place is magical. It's a triangulation of healing between myself, between the company, between Jarvis, a dozen young people, all who've been affected by the prison industrial complex in this country, with loved ones either recently or currently incarcerated. And that was not a requisite for being in the company. That was a coincidence by nature of who's in the room. Jarvis has been offered the opportunity to work directly and have an impact on the lives of so many young people 3,000 miles away who are currently the age that he was when he was put behind bars. One another's reflections and affirmations, both in awe that the other one knows that they exist and cares. He says, "You have my wings." They say, "You have my wings." And I'm in between, mediating this dialogue, receiving calls from death row multiple times a week, hearing the sounds of prison in the background, developing a powerful friendship with a man who has been deemed a monster by our justice system. And he is beautiful. And I've been locked in a cage with him for hours, sharing tears and laughter and anger and hope, testifying, bearing witness, holding space for one another as we grieve our losses and celebrate our lives. So my monster is spending 175 years in prison, multiple lifetimes, and Jarvis sentenced to death. And they are human, beautifully human and flawed and innocent and guilty, and we are healing. So this opportunity is a gift, being offered a chance to witness and work with the traumas in others that so many of us has experienced ourselves, an opportunity to participate in collective liberation. My freedom inextricably bound to yours. King so potently reminds us that our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about the things that matter, and that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Open my palms to the sky, surrendering to the human hopelessness that spare me. For life needs no more. No more despair, I pray. To turn a situation as bad as mine into an opportunity to be of some benefit. To transcend my present circumstances. To transform everything around me into something almost radiant.
Boom, 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 banging, constant, robbing, consistent, bang, bang, my mind, I lose it, broken, pieces, shit, I'm bleeding, silence, kills me, noises, scare me, darkness, lights me, I don't know me, can you help me, hold me, heal me, save me, love me, please don't leave me, something sparks inside my mind and everything just dies, something sparks inside my mind and everything just dies. Who sharpened the knife? Who did it? Who killed that guard? Who sharpened the knife? Who killed that guard? Who sharpened the knife? Who killed that guard? Who sharpened the knife? Who killed that guard? Who killed that guard? You have been sentenced to solitary confinement. Systematic policies and conditions of control and oppression. Use and isolation include confinement behind a solid steel door for 23 hours a day. Limiting contact with other human beings. Rare non-contact and petty visits. Extremely limited access to rehabilitative and educational programs. Grossly inadequate medical and mental health treatment. Physical torture such as hog time, restraint chair, and forced subtraction. Mental torture such as sensory deprivation. Permanent bright lighting and extreme temperature. Forced insomnia and sexual intimidation and violence. Who sharpened the knife? Who did it? Who killed that guard? Who sharpened the knife? Who did it? Who killed that guard? Who sharpened the knife? Who killed that guard? Who sharpened the knife? Who killed that guard? Who killed that guard?
Night's bright stars, celebrating life's dreams, as peace sits still.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much to the Truth Workers. And you all will be here, right? We're going to bring you back up to talk to you. Okay, great. Fantastic. Thank you. Finally, last and not least, we are proud to bring Russell Frederick to the stage. Russell's a self-taught Brooklyn-born photographer of Panamanian heritage. He's the recipient of grants from the Open Society Foundation, the New York Foundation of the Arts, the Brooklyn Arts Council, and the Urban Artists Initiative Foundation. Frederick is a member of the African American photo collective Kamoing, and I'm sure I mispronounced that, and I apologize in advance, and is represented by Keystone Photo Agency in Switzerland. As an educator, he dedicates time to mentoring at-risk youth, young men, with the Kings Against Violence Initiative, in which he works as the men's program director. The title of his portfolio, which he will discuss with us this evening, is Once Upon a Time When We Were Kings. You may read more about Mr. Russell Frederick at russellfrederick.com. Please join me in welcoming Russell Frederick.
Wow, that was great. Glad to be here. Glad all of you have come out. The title, Once Upon a Time We Were Kings, pretty much just speaks about, I am going to pretty much just try to, all right, excuse me, I'm not the tech guru, I'm trying to work this out. Got it. Okay. So I came up with this title because so many of us may either know someone who has been incarcerated or have a friend of a friend, or just even reading about stories of men who've been locked up and hearing really pretty much about them paying their debt to society, but really their struggle just to have a decent, life. So the men I've photographed, some have been innocent, some made mistakes, some did some time when they shouldn't have, some have served some very, very harsh time. And with all of their experiences behind jail, the one thing that they all have spoken of is how jail just pretty much deconstructs you of any kind of self-esteem and hope you may have of becoming a normal citizen or of a man for the most part. So, photograph here, took this in 2001. This is in Rikers Island. So a friend of mine named Alfonso Kinsler. Al was actually falsely locked up. And once he was in jail, I found out, got a call from him. I immediately went to go see him. And this photograph was taken pretty much within 2 weeks. And I don't know if any of you have ever gone to visit somebody in jail, but you're not allowed to bring anything. But on the route, I spoke to a corrections officer, and I said to him that I was a photographer, and I would like to take a photograph of my friend so he could see what he looked like behind bars. The corrections officer couldn't guarantee me that my camera would get in. He said I would have to trust him with my camera, and this was the one photograph I was able to produce. After I made the photograph, Alfonso was released from jail. After a further investigation, it was found out that he was innocent, but during that time, he actually lost both of his jobs, and he fell behind on his mortgage for his house. He ended up losing his home. And from that point on, I'm gonna go to the next photograph. This is Al. I took this picture 2 weeks ago in front of his home. But from 2001 to 2000 to right now, Al has pretty much battled with hypertension. He has been in renal failure for the past 4 years, on dialysis 3 times a week, severely depressed, has not been able to get a stable job. Even the charges against him were false and he had them removed. He still has been suffering. He lost his home and he's been pretty much renting out a studio. So what has happened, you know what, to him, I think is millions of other men who are still struggling. And I think one of our greatest challenges right now is how do we defeat this beast of the legal system? Go to the next photo. Photograph here is of Tim. Tim is from Brooklyn. He's 50 years old. Took this photograph last month. Tim was locked up in the 90s. He was a Golden Gloves boxing champ. And while incarcerated, he got into a fight with somebody and they hit him with a lock in his eye, and his retina was pretty much shattered. So he's been blind in his right eye since, and has just struggled with trying to find, you know what, a decent job and just trying to live. Tim right now, constantly in therapy. He works at a pizza shop, just making deliveries. Sorry about that. Okay. A photograph over here. This is T. T took this picture in 2007. T had did about, I believe, 8 years. He didn't want to tell me exactly what he did time for, but in speaking to T, and some of this work that I'm presenting to you is all of a larger body work I've been doing on Bedford-Stuyvesant. So I've been documenting Bedford-Stuyvesant for the past 15 years and pretty much capturing the everyday life and the people of Bedford-Stuyvesant. So one day as I'm walking down Fulton Street, I saw T and I just approached him, told him that how I first thanked him for the work that he was doing. And I said to him that I appreciated the work that he was doing on the street and trying to keep our community clean. He thanked me, asked him if I could take a photograph of him, and this was it. And in talking to him, he pretty much said to me about how he would love to be able, that being on the streets was just a better joy even as a cleaner than being in jail, and that one day he hoped that he could have his own cleaning business so he can employ some people who have been locked up and give them an opportunity when so many people, when society just wants to reduce you to your mistakes and to your past. Photograph over here, took this in 2007 as well. This is Rashid and some of his friends. This is on Franklin Avenue. Rashid, at the time I took this picture, he was 23. I met Rashid at the age of 19 on Fulton Street. I saw him and he had a presence. I already knew immediately that he was involved with some street activity. And I approached him and said to him, I would make him a portfolio for free if he just came to my studio. And he came twice, and when he came to my studio on the second trip, he pretty much said to me about how he wished he had met me when he was much younger. And he said that how he was 19 and he had 5 Fs. For those of you who don't know, 5 Fs is slang for 5 felonies. And he said, you know, Russ, he's like, you the big bro I never had. And he said, I know if you was around when I was younger, some of the things, the trouble I got into in being a young man, not having an older brother, not having anybody to protect me, I probably wouldn't have gotten into some trouble. At this time when I saw him, I didn't see him for a few years. And at this time, he had gotten a call saying that someone had died, and he was a little depressed. After this photograph was made, haven't seen him again. He's been locked up since 2007. Last photo, this is Willie B. This is actually in the 3rd Ward, New Orleans. Willie B, met him while I was in New Orleans on a fellowship for the Open Society Institute. For 1 year, I was documenting the aftermath. And while I was down there, Willie B pretty much saw him, introduced myself, and in talking to him, asked him just what happened, you know, with the scar, and asked him to tell me a little bit about his life. And he told me that how when he was in the street, he got into a fight, and a guy tried to pretty much kill him with like a hatchet. And he suffered a severe injury, as you can see, pretty much destroyed his left eye. But to rewind a little bit, Willie B, at the age of 15, had to actually start taking care of his family. His mother wasn't working. He spoke about how not having food to eat, not having electricity, and felt that he had to be a man of the house and start providing. And in getting involved with some street activity, it led to, you know what, him being incarcerated a few times, and then him suffering this injury. So with these photographs, I think the one thing which I'm just trying to do with everybody is really find the humanity in all of them and challenge everyone to see the humanity, you know what, in people. So our society, our legal system pretty much discriminates against anyone who has a felony. If you have a felony, you can't get public housing, can't vote, employment, educational opportunities, loans. You are pretty much labeled for the rest of your life. And for all of these men, they have pretty much just tried to struggle. They've tried to survive, but their struggles are apparent even with their health. A lot of them are on medication. And where is the support? Now, I could say one thing which I'm trying to do now is intervene with some young men who may be at risk, and that's the work I do with the Kings Against Violence initiative. It's through photographing, coming across men like Willie B, T, trying to be part of the solution. And that is just something I also just say to all of you. Let's just all try to be part of the solution. Thank you.
think we'll now ask all of our artists in residence to join us in the front, and thank you for the lights. Please join me in thanking everyone one more time. It's been fantastic. Yeah, this is really, and also to the Truthworker Theater group as well. One more round for them as well. I want to thank all of you for sharing your remarkable work and with us and the world. Is this on, by the way? Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay. I just can't hear myself, I guess. Sorry. This has been really incredible. There's so many things that all of this brings out that I'm really looking forward to discuss. The first thing that comes up, and I'm halfway thinking out loud here, so I want you to bear in with me. Maybe one of you just give me a signal if I start to go off the rails. But there's something in all of your work that really captures a certain tragedy, but also a certain amount of hope. And that's important for so many reasons, because if we become bogged down in the tragedy of the situation, it's a very quick slide from that to being overwhelmed, and then, of course, to being paralyzed. Yeah. There's ways in which all of you found strategies to negotiate that. What is the process like in that? In terms of what is your strategy for mining, the hope in a situation, or the humanity of a situation? How does that? I guess I just went off the rails, didn't I?
That was great.
And this is open,
okay.
Yeah, open for anyone, yeah.
I guess I really need to be telling stories about people who inspire me. And when I met the men volunteering to take care of their peers and their friends, and even Angola is the size of Manhattan, the prison itself. There are 5,000 or 5,100 men incarcerated there. 85% will be serving a life sentence, and they'll never be released. And when I met these men crossing physical boundaries, I'm sure that in that picture where there were 4 men each of them massaging a certain limb, one man had arm, the other had the other arm. The hospice volunteer, the caregiver, was teaching the others who were co-workers in the carpentry shop. He was teaching them how to increase the circulation in their friends, in their colleagues' body. And I could see the hesitation as they were approaching their friend. I could see that they had never been able to touch another man in that way so tenderly and so in order to make their lives more comfortable. I can see them crossing their own bridges, and I was so profoundly moved by their courage that I knew that I wanted to try to talk about that journey, and it was inspiring me, and it motivated me to push my way back into the prison time and time again to try to get access and to try to tell the story completely. So when I started to, when I presented the story, people could see the journey that they were on and somehow maybe think about it and be aware.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak. Hey, y'all. It's so quiet in here. I think about the duality of tragedy and hope. I think about all of our times like puddled on the floor of our free donated rehearsal space in Clinton Hill, on the phone, all huddled around my laptop, which is recording on GarageBand, and having my cell phone on speaker while Jarvis engages in conversation with us. There's tragedy and there's hope right there. And it's been really important and necessary for our own self-care, for our own survival through this process, which is heart-wrenching to go in and create, to stay present to all that exists. And, you know, when we speak with Jarvis, there is the tragedy that's really present in the fact that we're every day falling deeper in love with this human being who is our friendship and all the multiplicity of our humanity and what it all looks like is coming to the surface. And so the tragedy there is that we become closer and closer and closer, pressed up against the reality of the fact that he's speaking to us from death row, that he's been sentenced to death. And then the hope is also there simultaneously, and they live together. And the hope is in the lessons that we learn every day and that we teach one another, the laughter that we share, the fact that we're having this unbelievable human connection, the fact that we're dreaming together, that we're creating together. I'm like, I think today was maybe the third time I ever tweeted. I'm like not a technology person, and yet we're using technology to mediate this transformational healing that's allowing us to really connect to a sense of hope where we're recording our conversations, we're all being able to speak and listen and learn and go back and remember and study and share gems and create something together and say, you know, like, what did you dream last night? Or like, can you tell us the first lesson that you learned spiritually that made you want to pursue the path of Buddhism that you're on, that helped you get through each day? Or can you tell us about a moment between you and a guard where something changed? And, you know, the company has an arsenal of questions and curiosities, and then there's this incredible connection and learning, and it makes every moment and every day more livable and more bearable for Jarvis. And it also, I mean, I can't speak for you all, I can speak for myself, but while it's heavy, and there are heavy hearts around this, and it also is forcing every single one of us in the room to connect to our own relationships and stories around incarceration, and a lot of those hold a lot of trauma. But at the same time, there's that incredible fulfillment that you get from loving someone and knowing someone and growing with someone and just being in the mud together, you know, and being human together. So, yeah.
Right. Can we, I want to interrupt just for a second here. Could we ask the truth workers if each of you could maybe just stand up and face the audience, tell us your name. You all are so young, so tell us your age. And I meant that in a good way. I'm jealous, actually. I wish you know. And tell your name, your age, and tell us where you're from, please, if you don't mind.
Hi, my name is Samara, and I'm 16 years old, and I'm from Clinton Hill, Brooklyn.
Hey everyone, my name is Carnell Keith Stewart. I'm 18 years old, and I'm from Far Rockaway, Queens.
My name is Ricky Matos. I'm 21 and I'm from Park Slope, Brooklyn.
My name is Desi, and I'm 18 years old, and I'm from the streets of Best-Time.
My name is Alon McCrae. I'm from East New York, Brooklyn, and I'm 18.
Hi, my name is Mari. I'm 17 years old. I'm from California, and I currently reside in Brooklyn.
My name is James Galliardo. I'm 18, and I'm from Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn.
My name is Ethan Romero. I was born in Harlem, Panama, and I live now in Brooklyn.
Samuel, I wanted to share in the interview Samara did with Of Notes writer Raju Punjabi, which you'll see come out. It's beautiful, by the way. You'll see come out later on this month. One of the things that you shared about these young people is that almost every one of the members in the troupe either know somebody that's incarcerated or a family member that's incarcerated, and that's just a stunning piece of data that each and every one of them is that close to our prison systems.
Well, and I actually wanted to ask some of the members of the troupe as well, if any of you would like to volunteer. So what was it like speaking with Jarvis and forming this relationship that Samara described? What was that like for you, or what is it like for you? It's Ricky, right?
Yes. I would say I don't need a microphone.
These are actors here. They know how to voice.
I would say that the first couple of times that we had spoke to Jarvis, I mean, it's kind of a surreal thing. It's kind of like we hear about all the times that Samara has spoken to him and the time that she went to go see him. It's kind of like one of those things where you anticipate this release of something, like, oh, this thing is coming out for us. It was like, we're going to get to speak to Jarvis once this work gets to start, especially after reading his books. And for myself, just having family members that were incarcerated and just hearing the stories that they tell, being on the phone with this man who's been most of his life incarcerated, you start thinking back to some of the things that your family told you about when they were incarcerated, and you couldn't even fathom some of the things that this man is going through behind, solitary confinement walls, where there's a video that's part of our show that has one statement that's just so powerful about how we're driving men who are sane mad, and those who are already mad we're just putting in the ground. And for me, it was just like speaking to Jarvis. The fact that everything that comes out of Jarvis's mouth when you speak to him is like, it's light. There's nothing like, oh, I'm depressed today. He just tries every inch of himself to just find that good in that day. And it's heartwarming to hear a man. You can actually hear him smile when he speaks to us. You can actually hear the joy in his voice. And just his enthusiasm, it's like almost you giving a kid a toy and he's so excited about it. Jarvis is that way with this production of ours and this collaboration, because every little thing he's just like, well, let me hear some more, that was wonderful, you guys. I can't believe that some of the things that you guys are putting in to the production are things that I haven't even told you, and that takes him by surprise. So personally for me, it's surreal, but at the same time it's eye-opening, and it really speaks to the fact that, as Samara said, most of us out here are probably not as happy within themselves as Jarvis has found himself happy within his own.
Russell, I wanted to bring the question back to you. And I hope we can explore this a little bit later on as well. I thought one of the interesting juxtapositions between your work and Lori's is that Lori is finding and depicting people at the end of their lives, and that for them the terminus is it's locked up, it's in incarceration. Whereas for you, you're finding people and depicting people where that is part of their past, but clearly it's this ghost that haunts every step of their present and their future. What at a certain point, it seems like many of the people that you interview as you photograph them would have similar tales to tell, I would think. Or how do they describe this feeling? We tend to think of in mass incarceration. We always talk about the 2.3 million people. We don't remember that it's not the same 2.3 year after year. That these are brothers and sisters who go in. They might do Alphonse 2 weeks, clearly affected 12 years later. Or even obviously you could do longer than that and have an effect. We don't recognize that this affects much more than that. To say nothing of the families as well. What is their what's their take on this?
From talking with all of them, what they all have felt is just how they almost wish they were dead in some ways, because it's hard for them to just, function, to actually feel good about themselves, to actually find, forgiveness, to have, I think, a lot of the basic things that we all have access to: love, a job, stable home. None of these men really have access to that. And really, nobody cares. So for them, this whole deconstruction of their own esteem, their value, you can understand why this turns into a cycle, and some of them end up back in jail. But what I try to do, when anyone gives me the privilege to actually photograph them, I always try to capture them in a way where it's honest, that even when they're not at their best, they will still be proud of the photo, as well as to try to restore some dignity. And for me, I want to try to give these men and everyone who I photograph some sense of hope, some sense of resources, give them something back that they are giving me. And in them sharing their stories with me, it's hard to even to absorb it, to be a sponge and to hear it. It's a lot to take in. And at the same time, I try to let them know that, you're still a man. Don't let society reduce you to your past. And for some of them, like Al, he was innocent. He was innocent. And I think for the countless numbers of men like him, anger can pretty much just destroy you. And here it was, only 2 weeks he was locked up. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, once he got locked up, his employers, he had 2 jobs, they both released him. And once he got out, he fell behind on his mortgage. It actually took almost 2 months for him to get back to work. He was already 2 months behind on his mortgage. And all of this was because the police did not do a thorough investigation. And you have countless numbers of men, and here it is 12 years later, 13 years later, this was the first time he's been back to his old home. He is still struggling. And then when I think about someone like T, who paid his debt to society, who took ownership of his mistakes, he too, not knowing how to navigate this road of life, and next thing is not really even having the opportunities for rehabilitation to be self-sufficient. This is another very important, factor, is the prison system does not rehabilitate anybody. It destroys people. And for some of these men, like I said, with my photographs, I try to give them back what they may be missing. And I'm trying to actually be a vessel of hope, whether it's one part is the photography, the pictures, or is the introduction. And I can tell you this, with everybody who you see who I photograph, I try to always build relationships and help people in any way I can. It's a responsibility that I take personally as a journalist, as a photographer. I'm just not going to take from you. I got to give you something back.
Thank you. You know, that makes me think, I mean, this problem of mass incarceration, imprisonment, bad policing practices is so large. And one of the pieces I think that kind of extends itself out into our larger political discourse is, you know, there's this narrative going back, you know, many years, but it's reasserting itself these days where, you know, there's this way of our political leaders, you know, wagging their finger saying, you know, well, what we need to do is help black men, you know, pull their pants up, you know, be more industrious. And, you know, that's the key to, you know, changing the problem of mass incarceration. I mean, we see a little bit of this in the My Brother's Keeper initiative, where you know, seems to me anyway, the main intervention for that is helping, you know, black men get back on the right path. And then we see somebody, what clearly flies in the face of that is somebody like Alphonse, who had 2 jobs.
That's right.
And, you know, just the policing system and the criminal justice system ran him off the rails. I mean, another mythology that we have about what's been going on in Ferguson is that all this happened because of the death of Mike Brown, which was really just the flint on the tinder. What gets less discussed is that that entire community had been over-policed for years and years and years. And it's not just the daily harassment of, you know, the stop and frisk and, you know, you're turned loose, which is bad enough. But again, you know, you can, if you spend a couple of nights in jail for some bad policing, these are people losing their jobs or, you know, having their cars impounded because of a broken taillight. These are the reports that have coming out of there. And it's just, finally the community said, enough is enough. I mean, there's a real problem. I guess I brought my soapbox with me on this one as well. But I mean, there's a real problem in how we conceive of this issue. It's not about kind of reducing quote unquote criminality at all. It's clearly a social system. Lori, I wanted to, a similar question to the one I just posed to Russell about the stories, as the narratives that people tell of themselves. There's a lot going on in those photographs. You have people who are living the ends of their lives in hospice. You have people who around the clock, you said 6 volunteers per patient, right? In round the clock shifts. These are men who also work 40-hour a week job, 40 hours a week jobs. What do people say, or what do they think and say about living perhaps the end of their lives in incarceration? I would think that this could be a moment of tragedy, but is there ever a point where is there peace at all? I mean, that's part of what hospice, one would think, is supposed to be about. Right. And I imagine that's why many of these men are volunteering as well for some sort of
You
peace.
better believe it. It's their insurance policy as well for themselves.
How so? That's interesting.
You know, the hospital was the worst place you'd ever want to be in Angola before the hospice program came in. And in fact, it was the most feared location besides, you know, lockdown. And, you know, those were the 2 places you never wanted to be. And when hospice was created, one of the things that I guess I want to talk about is also dying in prison is the greatest fear. So it's a combination of dying in the hospital where they knew that patients would be left alone in pain. You know, the hospital wards are 2 giant rooms with about 50 beds. And still in that context, if you were sick and dying, you would still be alone. Hospice, when hospice was created, it was created because the warden thought it sounded like a good idea, and indeed it is. The special thing about what Angola brings to this conversation about end of life in prison is they train and they empower, and the empowerment came because they sought it. Okay, so I mean, there's so much to tell about this program and how it teaches us about how to carve space, how to carve love, how to carve safety, how to carve community out of pain, isolation, humiliation. and these are all kinds of themes that I'm dealing with, but and I'm getting caught up in talking about them all, but their commitment to each other. One of the things that the volunteers themselves said is, we will never ever let anybody die alone again. And that feeds and strengthens what they do. So they do create a vigil, and at the end of life, the patient is never alone. There's a team of 6 that do 4-hour shifts. And usually, if they can get access, because taking men from the dormitories, and they're spread out over Manhattan. So there's buses involved. There's security guards all along the way. So just the fact that the prison is facilitating the movements of the hospice volunteers to be with patients is enormous. It's an enormous commitment for them as well. And I just want to honor sort of what they've been able to carve out, because everything that these men do for their patients, they have asked for. They have asked for these vigils. They have asked for prison family members to be able to come and visit and sit with the patients. And that takes facilitation. That takes a whole chain of security guards and call-outs. And nothing moves without the permissions from the higher-ups. But they do this because they want to make sure that nobody ever is alone in death, but they also want to make sure that somebody's going to be there when they go. And they believe in this. And again, not everybody can do hospice, Many men train, and at their first patient, at their first, bed cleaning, or just the fragility of this man, it's too much, and the pain of losing the patient is too much. And they also take care of each other after death. One of the reasons why it took me 3 years to finish this project is they have developed a ritual of the end of life ritual where, again, talking about carving out a space that will be healing and be able to take care of yourselves. They have asked and received the permission that when a patient dies, a security guard, no guard ever touches that man again. They've gotten commitment from the security staff that says when that man dies, his sentence has been served. He is no longer a ward of the state. And they have gotten that from, and I want you to understand that over 10 years it came from hatred, animosity, and mistrust. And the only thing that broke those things down was the actions of the caregivers and their commitment to each other, in the context of knowing that they are on this same path. And these are the things that when I met them, I was like, I cannot even believe the journey you are on. I need to make pictures that rise to what you are doing for each other. And that was what drove me to come back. I could keep talking. I do want to talk about reflecting people's love. And I think that Samara and Russell are doing this as well, and I think it's what joins this work. I collaborated with the quilt makers on this, creating the exhibition that traveled to prisons through Mississippi and Louisiana. And the prison organized a launch where we, for the first time, and I was doing everything on the outside. They were making their quilts on the inside, but I was creating these panels, and so we were working on the outside and inside. And on the day of the launch, I raised these panels in the hospice chapel that they raised money for and built themselves. The nurses came in, and the caregivers came in, and the patients came in. And I've never been more moved in my life, because I felt like for the first time, these caregivers, these men serving life sentences, these, what is it? What's the F word again? Felony. these men that have committed felonies, they were looking at themselves for the first time with a touch of generosity. They were seeing themselves. They allowed me to see them and to show them the way I see them as a source of inspiration and teaching and courage. And they, for the first time, saw how I saw them. And I felt like it was the first time they let in that a little bit of generousness towards themselves. I feel like that's what's happening I think that you are reflecting Jarvis's life and passion and goodness, and I feel like that's what this art is doing. It's reflecting what's inside and encouraging the people that we're telling stories about to be generous towards themselves.
Thank you. I just realized that I could do this all night. This has been fantastic, but I did promise that I would open the floor for questions as well. So I apologize that I'm running a little bit off of schedule with that. I do have one question that I've really wanted to ask for Grace Ali, the editor. Grace, how did you arrive at this subject matter? I know that Of Note magazine has a special topic for each of its issues with 10 artists, correct, in each issue contributing work about the subject at hand. And how was this decision made to do something this important? And who are your peers? Are there other arts magazines that have been doing this, or?
It was a really personal decision. I think if we actually paused and thought about the people in our lives, I think we actually would come up with the same data that Samara's young people have, where either someone we love or someone we're close to has been incarcerated or has someone that they love that's been incarcerated. And I know that's certainly been my life and my experience. And so I was actually talking to a friend, and her conversation about loving a man that was on life. And it really made me think about, as I said when we opened the conversation, the things we don't talk about. And I imagine, what is it like to commit your life to somebody that's behind bars? And to every week go through that journey of visiting that person and then leaving, having to leave them there. And that's the other kind of slice of this beast of the issue that we don't really know much about, is for the 2.3 million people that are in our prison systems, that's 2.3 million families and loved ones and friends and relationships that have to be maintained and sustained in that way. So it was a really personal decision to commit an issue to it. But then in terms of curating and thinking about who the artists were, we weren't necessarily thinking about the policy conversations as you and I talked about. And, outside of this event, there's so much of that, and there's enough expertise on that, on the data and the statistics. But what we don't hear is the heart stories, right? The hope stories. And I would add to your question about these artists, that their work elicit hope in us. I also hope that it elicits rage. I really hope it angers you. I mean, hope is good. Hope is nice. It's all be Gandhi, like, hope is great. But I hope that you look at the work and you're pissed off, right? That it angers you and it enrages you, because then that rage will lead to action. Then that rage will lead you to look at the prison system in other states and say, are there hospice care programs in the state of Arkansas? How are they treating their elderly population? So rage is the part two that we're after. And I think when you see the issue later on this month, and when you see these 10 artists collectively come together around this, you'll see all those things. You'll see hope, but we also are, our agenda is that it fires up some kind of action in you, an activism in you. And the part, of Note's work is committed to artists and artists using their work in activism ways. Artists, I don't know how many of you saw Harry Belafonte's beautiful, moving speech when he received the award at the Oscar ceremony, I think a week ago. He quoted Paul Robeson, and the role of artists is really, to use your theater title, as the truth seekers of our time. And so artists bring a very interesting and unique perspective to this issue that we're not going to get from the policy folks, we're not going to get from the academics and the historians. And I think you see that here. Russell's work in particular is really moving to me because Russell is not just using the camera as a tool. Russell is on the ground engaged with these men. When you see the piece and you read the captions of how he's able to talk intimately about who these men are, he knows their stories. He's not just shooting them. They're not just subjects for the camera, right? He's very much engaged in their lives. And that's the difference. No disrespect to the policy folks, but that's, I think, the difference. Or the historians.
Yeah, which
but that's,
I'm a member of that tribe.
Or
what
the
did we ever do to
editors.
you?
Or the editors. Or the curators. One of them. That's the issue with these artists, and I think that's the other connective tissue among the 10 of you and the 3 of you here, is that you all, Samara, Lori, you're on the ground. This issue is very personal to Lori. Her mother was a hospice care worker, so she knows it from a personal level as well. And I just think that as the 3 of them exemplify why we do the work that we do, why Of Note exists, why it curates around these very hard. I mean, I was saying to Samuel as we were watching Russell's last images, I said, you're going to have to say something to lighten up the mood in this room, because it's a tough room.
Can I say something briefly? I'm just thinking about what you said about being in relationship to one another and bringing to the forefront the humanity. And there's a term that I play with, which is fierce vulnerability. And, I think about that as really what presses me forward as the thrust of my work in all that I do is, and I tell you guys this all the time, is, be courageous enough to be vulnerable. What kind of revolutionary work is it to be vulnerable and to be unafraid of intimacy, And I think that that's so much to circle back to what you surfaced a little bit about the poignancy of every young company member having a loved one who is currently or recently incarcerated. The only one who stepped forward and said, I don't have anyone, it just came here from another country, from Trinidad. And so when you think about the U.S. citizens all having, and the fact that was not a requisite, that was something that just came up, and it came up deep into our work. Last July 2013, we started Barcode, the work around the school to prison pipeline, and we continue to develop it and workshop it from the summer through the spring, and it wasn't until May 2014 when we went and saw an extraordinary show produced by the Foundry Theater called The Box, and they were wearing gray shirts, and it was amazing, right? Yes. And so we had the privilege of having tickets donated to the company. Afterwards, we were debriefing it in rehearsal, and someone was like, yo, did you notice that we wear orange but they were wearing gray? And someone else was like, yeah, well, my uncle wears gray. And someone was like, well, my brother wears green. And I just stood there while literally all but one person went around and said, my fill-in-the-blank wears fill-in-the-blank. And I was like, and that was such a chilling moment for me. And I was like, it didn't even all get disclosed because that fear of that vulnerability and that intimacy, it took us that long to get there as a company. And we actually brought that into the spring run of our show, where at the end of the show, each of us comes forward and says, my fill-in-the-blank wears fill-in-the-blank, as a way of being courageous enough and inviting everyone who's in community with us in this temporary moment, like we're sharing right now, what happens if we step forward and we exercise and explore fierce vulnerability? How does that create a paradigm shift when we think about policy? You know, how will that inform policy making? So I just wanted to share that anecdote.
All right, thank you. This is powerful work, all of you. Thank you so much, Grace, for putting this together. Thank you, Lori Waselchuk, Samara Gaev, and Russell Frederick. Please join me in thanking our panelists. We do have, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. We do have, I think, maybe 15 minutes for some question and answer. And I'm not sure how we're supposed to work this. I, too, am not a tech person. Do we have a floating microphone or a bullhorn or anything?
Project.
Yes, we do.
Blessings, thank you for bringing this work to us. With this advent of television and these reality shows or point of view shows with prisons, in your journeys and the things that you have seen and the things that you have worked with, what is the one thing that you wish that they would, the point of view that they would give us that they're not doing now? Did I totally confuse you?
Just because we have people watching at home on, and if that probably wasn't picked up by the mics, I'm going to reiterate the question. If I get it wrong, just correct me. The question on the floor is, with all of the proliferation of reality shows, point of view shows, even I think, would you include the fiction shows like Orange is the New Black? Yeah, film. What are they doing that contributes to the dialogue, and what are they doing that harms it? Did I get that part as well?
Actually, what I'm saying is, all these shows that we see, but the work that you're doing, what is the one thing that you wish they would show that they do not, that you have seen through your work?
Sorry, thank you very much.
TV.
Netflix? Or no? Nothing?
That's not true. I watch movies.
But it's a really good question, and we were talking about this too earlier, Samuel. Have these fictionalized, Orange is the New Black and things like that, are they more harmful than helpful, right? Are they desensitizing us or even trivializing the experience of being in prison? And I know that from what I've seen, the people that have been in prison feel it greatly trivializes that experience. And I think if we turn to experts, they should be the experts on that. But it is an interesting question of, are these shows harmful or helpful?
I mean, I'll speak broadly in just saying that I think that the initial impulse to bring these narratives into media is good, to bring trans characters into media and queer characters into media and incarcerated voices into media. But what so quickly happens with the networks is what sells, and it becomes like campy, and it becomes exploitative, very, very quickly. And so I think that there's a disconnect between the initial impulse and then this capitalistic thing that we are living in.
I want to move to another question, and I think, do we have, oh yes, sir, thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the artists for their work. This is a general question, but it also goes out to the teacher. Having worked we still do work for the Department of Miseducation, as I call it. They willfully teach us in the classroom that slavery is ended, and that's a lie.
Yeah.
It is still written in the Constitution. Angola was a plantation, and it functions like so. A lot of these shameful images and movies that glorify and sometimes make you think that our young folks should use this as a rite of passage to be in one of these institutions is also feeding a slave system. And I've had the experience of being wrongfully picked up. It is extremely traumatizing not to want to choke somebody in blue who is, perpetuates that system, because it has to function on, there's been profit in it. And they have to keep the profit going has to feed. When you're lined up to go to, pre-whatever, it's like slaves being carted off, and the cells are like slave galleries.
Mm-hmm.
We have not in this country dealt with slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at those images where in hospice, it humanized, and thank you for making people human again. Because unfortunately, all images in these cop shows make you think that these are black and brown animals that you should throw away. Prisons are being more and more privatized.
That's right.
I had a niece-in-law that's been disappeared at the age of, 17? 16, sorry. 16, who had mental disability, so she had the mind of maybe a 13-year-old, and was disappeared in solitary confinement for 7 months for being out of status.
Oh, Jesus.
This is what's going on.
Yeah.
This whole culture of the other. I think it should be mandatory reading, and we should dump the Common Core, that they have to read the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Okay? We know the poem, first it was somebody and then it's somebody else. White folks, it's going to be you very soon, and it's happened. Okay? Maybe we ought to stop feeding the system in profit. How can we get our young folks to stop sleeping in the rain, not to get a job, but to spend money they don't have on phones and sneakers, which also feeds in the system of doing something because they're not paid enough to commit crimes to feed a system. So what can we do? Maybe we need to cancel Christmas. Don't spend,
Yeah.
and I think about this, and the sisters need to step up and demand that the brothers don't buy anything, because that's what. So in other words, let's cancel Christmas to February 14th, hold our money, because taxes, pay these force public their salaries. There's no penalty for them doing wrong. The top get free for wrong, for paying out and doing wrong. The people on the bottom don't. What can we do to start the change?
Thanks. There were a few in there I'm going to try to pick out for us. So thank you so much for all of those. There was one that perhaps we didn't touch on, or a couple in there that haven't been touched on, with the issue of capital and private prisons. And I might also say that a lot of the public we talk a lot about private prisons, but let's not get it twisted. A lot of the public prisons, there's somewhere involved, there's a profit line as well. Did that come up in any of your work? Is that something that stood out, either from when your subjects speak to you or just kind of in your own reflections?
Well, Angola was a bunch of plantations, and its nickname came from, just real briefly, it's a nickname given to Angola, and it's but it's because all of the slaves that were working those plantations they came from the Angola port. Yeah. In Angola, it's both a prison and a money-making machine. They've got public events. They've got an annual rodeo where everybody's volunteering. All the men want to participate because it gives them a chance to interact with the public. They've got a crafts tent. It's kind of like the market right next door, and the men work all year to sell the goods that they make, and of course the prison takes some of it. They raise cattle, they raise food, they have a golf course, they have all kinds of things going on. It's a very shady space, right? And it was actually very difficult for me to focus on the story that I needed to tell because I just kept wanting to turn. But also I would advise you to look at a series of reports done by the New Orleans Times-Picayune and ProPublica. They 2 years ago they did a story about how the prisons, the jails, were income generating depending on how many bodies they had in their in their prison, and the sheriffs actually built their budgets around numbers and bought new equipment based on numbers. So they had to continue to pay off their loans by arresting a certain number of kids in the streets. I highly recommend this series. It is raw, and it's what I think we always suspected, but once journalists start to put the numbers down and all of their the facts, it's disturbing.
I want to add to that really quickly, just in terms of thinking about the capital and the profit and the relationship around money and prisons and youth and education and miseducation. One thing I would say is also, one thing we've worked with is Joy DeGruy-Leary's post-traumatic slave syndrome as something to think about as human axiology and how we develop into who we are and the skin we're born into. But a very quick anecdote is that, and I've told this to my youth, that my eyes were blown open really quickly to some of the miseducation and the money thing when right after I was assaulted, I was pulled because my neighbors brought me to the emergency room, and I did not want to call the cops. I did not want any police involved whatsoever. I was like both a prison abolition activist and a completely traumatized woman at the time who had a gun to her head and believed that this person would murder me if I said anything. So I had no choice in that, which I quickly came to realize as soon as I was brought to the hospital and there was a weapon involved. There were detectives in the room with me. So when I was pulled into this criminal investigation, and I was one of multiple women who were assaulted by this boy in our neighborhood, I was kind of forced to canvass the neighborhood, which means drive in an unmarked but very obvious police van in the projects, and at like 5 miles an hour. So this was comfortable, and I'm in the back with my godmother, like trembling and undone and angry and all sorts of things. And really at that point, I think I was more like the activist, and I think maybe it was also easier to feel like the activist rage than the personal stuff. So I was just like hated the cops and hated the system and couldn't believe that any of this was happening. And something happened, which was as we're like rolling 5 miles an hour through, a whole bunch of boys drop the basketball, come off the court, and go, yo, yo, yo. And they raise their hands. And the cops say, not today, boys. Yes. So what I was like, what just happened? And they said, oh, they were volunteering for a lineup, which means that our young boys know that most likely they fit the description of someone being accused of a crime. They will get paid $50 to stand in a lineup. Not thinking about the consequences of what happens if someone's like, that's him. And the price of that. And so the way that our system also uses incentive, particularly in low-income communities, of financial incentive. So that's just something else. I want to shout out Zafar, who's one of our company members. Zafar, will you stand up really quickly? I just saw him when the light came on. He's hiding with a red hat, but I just peeped him. Hey, Zafar. Thank you for joining us.
Sorry. I had my train of thought until the sister expressed the last comment. I just really appreciate, give thanks, and just for your purpose and your spirit in the work that you do and your commitment. I'm Mosi McCory. I arrived a little bit late, so I missed the presentation, if there was a presentation, but I did hear the dialogue and the talk. And also in relation to purpose, I was born and raised in New Orleans. I'm from New Orleans. I've sort of recognized my purpose as an intermediary. I've investigated cases of wrongful conviction for persons serving life sentences in Angola for the last 5 or 6 years. My first trip to Angola was by way of a family reunion after I located my absentee father's absentee father, and found out that his dad was from Tunica, Louisiana, where the prison is, which is larger than Manhattan, by the way, too. But I can talk more about that. I've been working with youth in New Orleans in the public school system to build upon a critical pedagogy that sort of confronts these realities with an organization called Students at the Center. The co-director is ColumbiaU Salam. The program builds out of a pedagogy of the oppressed, sort of like point of position, point of departure, or whatever, in relation to education for liberation, not mainstream socialization. And I'm here for a year with the Nathan Cummins Foundation as a fellow to build upon this work, because in relation to the raise that you mentioned earlier, one thing that happened, I guess it wasn't coincidental, was that my big brother right here, John Thompson, who spent his 18 years in prison, 14 years on death row in Angola prison, he initiated me into this work. He baptized me into this work. I began working with Innocence Project in New Orleans, and John and I visited a classroom in New Orleans where one of the clients with Innocence Project, his daughter was in the class. So that brought it right to our face in terms of, okay, we need to collaborate and support youth to address this reality now. Like, this needs to be a part of our educational curriculum, our experience, our writings, sort of to embrace and validate the knowledge that the youth have, but also provide them the technical tools or skills to confront the system. So through that experience, in the cases that we're investigating, kids got involved with the case. They traveled to Angola prison to meet one of the clients. The Thursday after things taken, they took their day on Friday, but the warden would not let them meet with the client because he didn't admit his guilt. Because he was convicted and found to be guilty by a jury and was wrongly convicted, but the warden would not allow the kids to meet this man who they were advocating for because they recognize the political power of that dynamic. And my ask is that I would love to collaborate with all of you or any one of you. We're seeking to expand the work to other cities. We just came back from Baltimore yesterday. We were at El Puente Academy for Peace and Justice in Brooklyn. That's why we're a little bit late today.
Beautiful.
And so in any way that we can further your work, I would like to do so. And if it's proper, I just would like my brother to say something. If you'd like to say something, if you don't.
I was wondering if I could ask one question about the work specifically, if that's okay.
Oh, well,
1 second.
I'm sorry. We're not quite done. I mean, Mr. Thompson, did you want to just say something? No. All right. Well, we'll
say one thing, because I do appreciate this message being passed. I was a victim of that same circumstances in Angola. Angola is the #1 nation, but we have a system that allowed this to happen, meaning judges and prosecutors is not held accountable. Right. And until we wake up to that reality, I was on death row. The man had 6 of us on death row. All of us been exonerated. I sued them. I won $14 million. They reversed it, saying that the prosecutors can't be held accountable. That's my mission, to seek accountability. Yeah. So until we really start addressing some of the serious issues, our children don't even know nothing about law.
That's right.
I mean, nothing about the criminal process. So we got to wake up and realize that we are targets. It's not school to prison I'm worried about. It's school to slavery I'm worried about. So, wake up, everybody, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
And welcome home, Mr. Thompson. Welcome home. Thank you. I think we have time perhaps for 2 more.
Sorry to interrupt. Every voice I've heard tonight has been so moving, and I wanted to ask something specifically about the work. Russell, I feel like you talked to this about the change you're making with your work, and I'd love to hear what change you think your work has affected, and that you were saying you humanize the people you photograph, and whether it's an individual or whether it's policy or whether it's just the general witness, I've seen this, now I know, or maybe something that is different than that.
Well, I do my best to try to humanize everyone who I photograph, especially once I hear of their stories. But just my whole purpose behind the camera is really to be to honor the people who are trusting me with their image. But what I would like to say, answering your question, this work is really hard work, because when you come this close to someone who is a victim of a system that really almost makes you feel like it's a legal system, like a legal genocide almost. I mean, when you look at the victims, I mean, the majority of them, they look like me, and they look like my Latin brothers. And when you look at the support, they're ghosts. The next thing is all of these men, they have some sense of value, some sense of purpose, and also too seeking some redemption. And if my photograph or my interaction, and I look at that as just a privilege. It's a privilege for me to be a photographer. It's a privilege for them. It's a privilege for me, for them to trust me with their story. And I really do this work to put it back out here to us. Everyone in here has some sense of power, some sense of resources. And once you leave this room, I know we all gonna go back to our daily lives, but really think about what you saw. Think about the people who you may see who may panhandle. Think about those young men you see cleaning your streets. Think about really even how great of a life you may have, even though, you know what, you may have some debt, but how you have your home. You know what, you can get a cell phone. You go to work. And what are we all doing, you know what, to try to at least, you know what, step outside of ourselves and be part of this solution so that this cycle doesn't affect anybody in here, anybody directly. It has affected a lot of us, but once it's your daughter, it's your son, it's, you know what, your neighbor, that's too late to take action. Let's all just try to be part of action. That's all.
We have one more question.
I was wondering how, as photographers, you take the work, you make the work, but you kind of push it even more forward to affect as wide of an audience as possible. Do you work with journalists? Do you work with policymakers? Do you kind of compile your own data to get the numbers, to make this work like really stick? Mm-hmm. Which I think sometimes as photographers, we don't think about the numbers, but the numbers are so important to drive our own work and to make our work so much more impactful. When I saw Lori's work, I thought of the documentary that came out on Angola and on the hospice.
Serving Life.
Yeah, Serving Life. And I thought about, I saw it, I thought it was amazing, but I couldn't help but think of, how is this being used to influence prison systems for men and for women, all over the country.
Yeah. That, the producer started that project after seeing the work. So she was able to sort of basically get the story. And we worked together in the beginning, and then she made her piece. But the important thing for me in my work is to make sure that present the documentary work that I do in a way that engages communities. We built this exhibition that travels. It's been in a total of 8 prisons, and that was the initial intent. I built it so it was simple enough to be put up by anybody, and so it travels in prisons. And I will say that since it started traveling, hospice has been started, or some kind of end-of-life care has been started in 8 more facilities in Louisiana. Yeah. I can also say that because of the work, they have released the first 2 patients on compassionate release in its 100-year history. The exhibition has continued to travel around the United States. It's probably been in about 40 locations. And how I've built this project, so it's not just making the work and telling the story and, oh, that's just wonderful. It's about inserting it into other people's conversations, because it seems to, there's lots of ways to connect to the work. And so I people can contact me and host the exhibit and develop their own programming and conversations around the exhibit. And so it's been in churches, at farmers markets, it's been in hospitals, it's been at conferences, it's been in libraries, it's been in art museums, it's been at gallery crawls. I mean, and everybody that hosts it takes ownership of it for a month or whatever they want it, for however they want it, and they develop their own conversations, and I don't have anything to do with it. It's theirs for a month. And so it's very important that the work that I do is distributed in ways that engage the people that I think it means most to. And so while I'm making the work, I'm constantly trying to devise plans for how this work is going to be in the world. And yeah, it's a struggle, because then you have to, raise the money to make those conversations happen. So it's not easy. It's not a product. Yeah. It's a conversation, which are free,
Russell, did you want to, as a photographer,
No, I think Laurie handled that, but I want to say just one last thing. I want to first really thank Grace Ali for organizing, for choosing this issue. That so many of you have found that it's important, and that we don't really see any politicians really making any moves on, but how it is really impacting all of us. I just really want to thank all of you guys for coming. Brother. And the last thing is, if any of you have not read the new Jim Crow, you better get that book tonight. By Michelle Alexander. What Grace has just curated and organized, it is pretty much, I think, a visual of what Michelle Alexander is speaking about in her book. And it is an integral, book that everybody should read. And pass it on, to your friends, young people, everybody. Thank you.
I just want to give... I just want to, before we close out, just invite you all to next week. We have the full production of In Prism, which we showed you an itty bitty snippet of with partial cast. So the full cast is larger than this, and it's going to be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in Brooklyn. And you can we have flyers and stuff out there. But
what's the just for our audience viewing at home? What's the address and the time? Do you know that?
Absolutely, yeah. It's the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, which is Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 7:30 in Brooklyn at Jack, 505 and a half Waverly Avenue between Fulton and Atlantic. And we also have a daytime, school time show at 2:30 on Friday for educators to bring students, which is really important. And we have a brief community dialogue after every show. The company's built a set. Yeah. So we would love to have you all there to bear witness. And you can talk to us outside. We also have T-shirts and sweatshirts that the young people have silk screened themselves, handmade one at a time, in order to try to support this work. All the young people get stipends to support the professional rigor of validating and valuing this work over bagging groceries. And the last thing I just want to say is that for those who are asking about the conversations with Jarvis, we do have a SoundCloud. You can just Truthworker SoundCloud or SoundCloud Truthworker, and we've shared an excerpt of a really inspiring conversation with Jarvis, where you can hear his voice and you can hear the exchange. I brought it today, but I think just find it and spend time with it on your own.
Fantastic.
So thank you so much.
I want to again thank all of you for coming this evening. I'd like to thank Grace Ali and Of Note Magazine for curating this exceptional issue, which will be published later this month. Please join me again in thanking Lori Waselchuk, Samara, Gaev, Russell, Frederick. My name is Samuel Roberts. I'm director of Columbia University's Institute for Research in African American Studies. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.